right, so on the first page of the notes, we did this. These were our 3 little mini topics that we were going to. Now we're going to go to our next page of our notes. On this page, you should have already figured out and checked in with me and confirmed that on number 1, we have 1 to 2. On the second part here, then, on the second part here, it would be 1 to 3 because it's part to whole. On number 5, AP is 5 and PB is 3. And so then part to whole would be 5 to 8. One thing that I do want you to notice and I want you to be able to pull out is the fact that this whole piece is the sum or adding up of the 2 parts, right? Which kind of makes sense. If we have 2 parts, if we add it up, we can come up with the whole thing. So now this is where we're combining it all together. What if we want to find the coordinates of a point that partitions a directed line segment into a given ratio? And here's the steps that we're going to follow. The first step is going to be to write the ratio as a part to whole in fraction form. Then we are going to multiply the horizontal component, which is the run, by the ratio found in step 1, then add it to the value of the x-coordinate of the initial point. That's our new x-coordinate. Then we're going to do the same story as we did here in number 2 for number 3, but we're focused on the y, or the vertical component. So let's start working through number 6, and hopefully these pieces will fall into place for you. So the first thing that we're doing is it says, given the directed line segment AB, that means that A is our starting point and B is our terminal point. Find the coordinates of P such that the ratio of AP to PB is 1 to 3. So what I think is helpful, you're going to constantly hear me encourage you rather, to draw a picture. So if we have AB and we know that P is somewhere in there, I'm not so concerned about where exactly P goes, but I want to put P in between to help me visualize what this piece here is saying. So what that says is from A to P is 1, and then from P to B is 3. Because step 1, we need to write our ratio in part to whole form. So I need to write it, starting with my starting point, in part to the whole. So we are going to call that fraction. In this case, that would be AP over AB. And so that would be 1 to 4 is our part to whole fraction. So that was step 1. So I'm going to put 1 there so we know that that's where this came from. Step 2 then is saying, all right, now that we did that, we got to find the horizontal component. If we go back and backtrack, the 2 ways of doing that is we can literally count what is that horizontal component, or we can subtract our x's. So I'm going to go ahead and real quick, I'm going to figure out what are my x and b, what are the x and y coordinates for A and B, what are those points? So remember, when you count, you always start at the origin. So I'd go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and down 1. So my coordinate for A would be -5, -1. Then if I'm doing B, I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So B is 7, 7. That's going to be helpful for us to be mindful of, and so that's why I want to make sure that we note that. So from there, going back to where it says here in step 2. In step 2, it says we're going to multiply the horizontal component, which is the run. We find the run by subtracting x2 minus x1. So we want to take that's our horizontal component, and we're going to multiply it by the ratio we found in step 1. Our ratio in step 1 was 1/4. And then we need to add it to x1. So then we're going to add it to x1. Whoops, I didn't mean to write an x. I want to actually write -5. And that's going to give me my new x-coordinate for point P. Okay, so you can type that into your calculator all in one shot, maybe even put this in parentheses to make it for sure not wonky and give you the right answer. But when you do that, you should get -2. Let's go through step 3 then. Step 3 is doing the same thing, but now we're focused on the vertical component or the rise. So we're looking at this piece right here. So again, you want to multiply the ratio times the vertical component, which is y2 minus y1 and -1. Then we need to add that to our original y starting point. And that's going to give us our answer for our new y coordinate, which would be the y coordinate of P. Type that into your calculator, do the mental math, do the algebraic simplifying, whatever, however you get that answer, and you should get 1. So that tells us that P, the point of P, is -2, 1. So I could plot that. I don't know why this keeps jumping. Sorry, guys. 1, 2, -2, up 1. Here's my P value. And that makes sense, right? Like the question says it breaks it down into 1 to 3 ratio. So if we think like, oh, if this is broken down like this, there's our 1 to 3 ratio. That makes sense, and we can check that, and we know that's good. So before we move on, and I know this section is going to take a little bit longer than I typically like videos to be, but before we move on, I want to talk through this a little bit more because I want you to understand why we are doing all of this. It's not just some random numbers we're throwing in there. So going back and backtracking, this is our ratio. This tells us how we're breaking it down. So I want you to think about if I said, okay, I have $100 and there's 5 people in your family and I'm going to split it up. Well, you wouldn't necessarily have to actually do the exact steps here, but you would likely think, okay, 1 out of 5 in my family, so I'm going to get 1/5 of the money Miss Massey has. So I'm going to get 1/5 of $100. I'm going to get, here's where this comes into play, 1/4 of how much ever money she's offering. In this case, it was 1/4 of that total X component, the total horizontal component. But just because you get 1/5 of my $100, that doesn't mean you have, that's $20. It doesn't mean you have $20 in your pocket, because what you have to remember is you started off with some money. We started off with our X component, we started off at -5. So we have to go from how much money we already had in our pocket to know how much money we actually have now. So you may have already had in your pocket $10, so you don't have $20 now. Now you have 30, because we have to take our 20 that you're getting, which we got from here, and we got to add that to what you already have. Okay, so that's how I want you to kind of think about this, because that's what we're doing. We're figuring out, okay, if we move 1/4 of the direction over on this horizontal component, if we move over 1/4, where would we end up? Well, in this case, we would end up at -2. And then we have to think, okay, but we're also going to move 1/4 up of this component. Where would we end up? And in this case, we end up at 1. So that's just another way of kind of thinking about this. We're going to talk through number 7 and 8 and make sure that we have a good formula before you do some more practice with this. All right, number 7 here. So again, we have our directed line segment RT. So in this case, R is our starting point, T is our terminal point. And we want to find the coordinates of S such that RS, so if I want to sketch this out again, R is my starting point, T is down here, and I know that S is somewhere in between. Again, I'm not so concerned about where you put that because I want you just to make sure you know which ones are in between. So if from R to S is 5, I'm going to mark it. And then S to T is 1, I'm going to mark it. So for that first step, my goal is to figure out what is my fraction, part to whole. So my part is 5, and my whole would be 5 plus 1, or you could say that that would be 5/6 is my part to whole ratio. Now, before we go too much farther, I want to go make sure that we know these coordinates for R. So R would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and up 1. So R is 7, 1. And then T would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going back and down, so T is going to be -5, -5. All right, let's crank this out and see what we can do. So that we did our step 1 would be right here. Step 2 is now we're looking and seeing, okay, I'm giving you 5/6 of the money, but we got to figure out 5/6 of how much money. So now we have to subtract to find our, this is working on the horizontal component or your X value. So then we have to subtract our X2, which comes from right here, minus X1. But then we got to figure out, that tells you how much money you have, but you got to add that to what's already in your pocket. So we have to add that to our X1 value, get our answer. And then for number 3, the step 3, I should rather say, is your vertical component, which is your Y value. So again, you're getting the same portion of it, 5/6, but this time then we're going to go with our Y2 minus our Y1, but we have to then add that to what's already in our pocket, which is our Y1 value. Type it in your calculator. You can get 2 answers for this. Shouldn't be without much trouble. You should be able to get -3 and -4. So that tells us that the point S is going to be at -3, -4. We are asked to plot this, so we need to come back here. Remember, you always start at that origin when you're counting, and so it'd be back 3, 1, 2, 3, and down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the S value would be right there. All right, I want you to do number 8 on the next page and then check in with me just to make sure that you have this part so far. Make sure that you're being mindful of what the part to whole ratio is, because in that one it actually gives you the part to whole. So that's where drawing a picture is going to be particularly helpful.